The ancient redwood towered 200 feet above Maya's head as she stood in the doorway of the cabin she'd never seen before. Rain hammered the moss-covered roof while she clutched the inheritance papers with shaking hands. 6 months pregnant, evicted, and down to her last $20, this rotting cabin was her only hope. Maya had always been told her great-aunt Eleanor was a recluse who died alone and poor. So why were expensive surveillance cameras hidden in the trees? And why did the ground beneath the massive redwoods feel hollow when she walked across it? As an investigative journalist, Maya had spent years exposing financial crimes, but she'd never imagined her own family was connected to something this big. The soil beneath her feet concealed more than root systems. It hid the kind of money that started wars. Someone had been watching this place for decades, and now they were watching her. Maya's journalistic instincts screamed danger, but her empty bank account and growing belly left her no choice. What had Eleanor really been hiding in these woods, and why were black SUVs already circling the property? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as Maya stepped inside the cabin, making her wince. Everything about this place felt wrong. The musty air carried traces of something metallic, and the floorboards creaked ominously under her feet. She'd driven 8 hours from Sacramento after receiving the inheritance notice, desperate enough to investigate what her lawyer had called worthless property in the middle of nowhere. The cabin's interior matched its decrepit exterior. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like dark flowers, and cobwebs draped the corners in ghostly curtains. But Maya's trained eye caught details that didn't belong. The locks on the door were high-end, recently installed. The windows, though grimy, were reinforced with wire mesh, and despite the cabin's apparent abandonment, there was no dust on the kitchen counter. Someone had been here recently. Maya pulled out her phone to call her lawyer but found no signal. The isolation pressed against her like a physical weight. She'd sold her car to pay for the rusty Honda that had barely made it up the winding mountain road. Going back to the city meant returning to homelessness, sleeping in her car until the baby came. A photograph on the mantelpiece caught her attention. Eleanor stood beside a much younger version of the massive redwood outside. But something was wrong with the proportions. The tree in the old photo appeared smaller, yet the timestamp showed it was taken 40 years ago. Redwoods grew slowly. This tree should look virtually identical to its younger self. Maya stepped outside, studying the giant more carefully. The bark showed signs of artificial augmentation, subtle but unmistakable to someone trained to spot financial irregularities. The tree had been modified, expanded somehow. But why? The hollow sound under her feet made more sense now. She knelt awkwardly, her belly making the movement clumsy, and pressed her ear to the ground. Definitely hollow. The soil had been excavated and replaced, probably multiple times based on the settling patterns. A branch snapped behind her. Maya spun around, heart hammering. A man in an expensive suit emerged from between the trees, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking through his clothing. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of polished appearance that screamed corporate money. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice carrying easily through the downpour. "I'm David Hartwell. I represent some people who are very interested in this property." "It's not for sale," Maya replied instinctively, though she had no idea what she'd actually inherited. Hartwell smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Everything's for sale, Miss Chen. The question is price. My clients are prepared to offer you $2 million for this land. Cash, transferred within the hour." $2 million. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. For 20 acres of remote forest and a rotting cabin, her journalistic instincts flared to life, the same ones that had gotten her fired for pursuing stories her editors called too dangerous. "What's really buried here?" she asked. Hartwell's smile faded. "That's not your concern. Take the money, Miss Chen. Start fresh somewhere else. Raise your child in safety." The veiled threat made Maya's blood run cold, but also strengthened her resolve. "I think I'll stay a while longer. Get to know the place." That would be unwise. Hartwell pulled out a business card, holding it just long enough for Maya to see the logo, Meridian Financial, one of the investment firms she'd been investigating before her termination. "The offer expires at midnight. After that, my clients become less generous." He disappeared back into the trees as silently as he'd appeared, leaving Maya alone with the rain and her racing thoughts. Meridian Financial had connections to offshore accounts and shell companies she'd been tracking for months. If they wanted this land badly enough to offer 2 million sight unseen, what was really hidden beneath these ancient roots? The baby kicked again, reminding her of the stakes. But Maya had never backed down from a story before, and she wouldn't start now. She had until midnight to uncover 40 years of buried secrets. Time to start digging. The rusty key turned with surprising ease, as if the cabin had been waiting for her return. Maya pushed open the weathered door, wincing as it groaned on ancient hinges. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, filtering through grimy windows, and the air tasted of abandonment and secrets. She hadn't been here since she was 12, the summer before Aunt Nora moved to Portland and cut all ties with the family. Even then, the place had felt forgotten, tucked away in a grove of towering redwoods that seemed to swallow sound and light. Now, 17 years later, it looked ready to surrender to the forest entirely. Maya set her duffel bag on the warped wooden floor and surveyed her inheritance. The main room was sparse. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by built-in shelves lined with decades-old books. A small kitchen occupied the back corner, its appliances dating to the 1970s. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust and neglect. Her phone buzzed. Another call from David, her third since she'd left San Francisco. She let it go to voicemail, just like the others. Whatever apology or explanation he had prepared could wait. Right now, she needed space to think, to figure out how she was going to raise a child on a barista's salary with no support from the man who'd promised to love her forever. The floorboards creaked as she explored the cabin's 2 small bedrooms. In what must have been Nora's room, she found a dresser with a stuck drawer. Maya tugged at it, and when it finally gave way, several yellowed photographs scattered across the floor. She knelt to gather them, her breath catching when she recognized faces from her childhood. There was her father as a young man, arm draped around a woman who wasn't her mother. There was Nora, decades younger, standing beside a tall man with kind eyes. And there were pictures of the cabin itself, but different somehow. Newer, with manicured grounds and what looked like construction equipment in the background. One photograph made her pause. It showed her father and the unknown man standing before a massive redwood, both wearing serious expressions. Someone had written on the back in faded blue ink, "The Sentinel," before we knew what it was worth. 1987. Maya frowned. The Sentinel must be one of the giant trees surrounding the property, but what did worth mean? These redwoods were protected. You couldn't cut them down or develop around them. That was part of what made this land both beautiful and practically worthless. A sound from outside made her look up, the distant rumble of a car engine. She went to the front window and peered through the grime, but saw nothing through the dense canopy of trees. The sound faded, leaving only the whisper of wind through the redwoods. Maya tucked the photographs into her jacket pocket and continued exploring. In the kitchen, she discovered the refrigerator still worked, though it smelled like something had died in it months ago. The water ran rusty for several minutes before clearing, and only one burner on the ancient gas stove would light. As evening approached, she managed to get a fire going in the stone hearth, using matches from the kitchen and kindling from a pile beside the fireplace. The crackling flames pushed back the growing darkness and made the cabin feel less like a tomb. She heated a can of soup on the working burner and sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the fire, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. The baby, their baby, though David had made it clear he wanted no part of this surprise, was barely 8 weeks along. Maya had another month before she'd start showing, another month to figure out her next move. The photographs lay scattered beside her, and she picked up the one of her father and the stranger again. Her dad had never mentioned owning property up here, had never talked about the years before he met her mother. Family history was something the Matthews family avoided discussing, as if their past was a wound too tender to touch. A sharp crack from outside made her freeze, soup spoon halfway to her mouth. It was too loud to be a falling branch, too deliberate to be an animal. Maya set down her bowl and moved to the window, but the fire had destroyed her night vision. Beyond the glass lay only impenetrable darkness. Another sound, definitely footsteps on the wooden porch. Maya's heart hammered as she remembered the car engine from earlier. Someone was out there, moving carefully around the cabin's perimeter. She grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace, its iron weight reassuring in her trembling hands. The footsteps stopped at the front door. Maya held her breath, waiting for a knock that never came. Instead, she heard the soft scrape of metal against metal, someone testing the door handle. The lock was old, flimsy. If someone really wanted to get in, it wouldn't stop them. Maya backed toward the kitchen, poker raised, as the handle slowly began to turn. The morning light filtered through the towering redwoods in cathedral beams, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. Maya stood on the cabin's sagging porch, cradling her coffee mug and watching the mist drift between the ancient trunks. 3 days had passed since she'd arrived, and the silence still unnerved her. No traffic, no neighbors, just the whisper of wind through branches that had been standing when her great-great-grandmother was born. Her phone buzzed, a rare occurrence given the spotty cell service. A text from her lawyer, Henderson, estate paperwork finalized. Property officially yours. Good luck. Good luck. She'd need more than luck to make this place livable before the baby came. The roof leaked in 2 places, the plumbing groaned ominously, and something had been scratching in the walls at night. Maya had convinced herself it was just mice, but the sounds seemed too deliberate, too rhythmic. She descended the wooden steps, noting how they bowed under her weight. Everything here felt temporary, as if the forest was slowly reclaiming what humans had dared to build among its giants. The nearest tree to the cabin was massive, easily 20 feet in diameter. Its bark was scarred with what looked like old markings, carved so deep they'd grown distorted with time. Maya approached the tree, running her fingers over the rough grooves. Not random scratches, these were deliberate. Numbers, maybe? Letters? The baby kicked, and she placed her other hand on her belly, feeling an odd sense of connection to this place, despite its strangeness. A branch snapped somewhere in the distance. She froze, scanning the misty forest. "Hello?" Her voice seemed to disappear into the vastness. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then the unmistakable sound of footsteps on fallen leaves. Maya's heart raced. She backed toward the cabin, never taking her eyes off the tree line. The footsteps stopped. She waited, barely breathing, but heard nothing else. Just as she turned to hurry inside, a man emerged from behind one of the massive trunks. He was tall and lean, wearing a faded flannel shirt and work boots. His hair was silver-streaked, and deep lines mapped his weathered face. He raised one hand in what might have been a greeting or a gesture of peace. "Didn't mean to startle you," he called out, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "I'm Tom Hartley. Live about a mile that way." He pointed deeper into the forest. "Been keeping an eye on this place since your aunt passed." Maya relaxed slightly but remained alert. "I'm Maya, Evelyn's niece." Tom approached slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening. "Thought you might be. You've got the family look." His eyes were kind but held something else, concern, maybe even worry. "How are you settling in?" "It's an adjustment." Maya gestured at the cabin. "There's a lot of work to be done." Tom nodded, his gaze drifting to the marked tree. Evelyn loved this old place, spent most of her time out here among the trees, said they held memories. He looked back at Maya. "She ever tell you much about the family history?" "Not really. My mother and Evelyn weren't close." Maya felt the familiar pang of regret. So many questions she'd never asked, so many stories she'd never heard. These woods have seen a lot over the years. Logging camps, boom times, families that came and went. Tom's voice took on a careful quality. Some stories are better left buried. The way he said it made Maya's skin prickle. What kind of stories? Tom was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. People sometimes get ideas about what might be hidden out here. Old tales about lost fortunes, buried treasure, brings out the worst in folks, if you catch my meaning. Are you saying there really is something hidden here? I'm saying you should be careful who you trust. Word's already getting around that Evelyn's place has a new owner. Tom's expression darkened. There are people who've been waiting a long time for the right opportunity. Before Maya could ask what he meant, Tom was already backing away. I'll check on you from time to time, if that's all right. These woods can be dangerous for someone who doesn't know their ways. Wait. Maya started forward, but Tom had already melted back into the forest with surprising grace for such a large man. She stood alone again, but the peace of the morning was shattered. Tom's words echoed in her mind: lost fortunes, buried treasure, people waiting for the right opportunity. She looked up at the towering redwoods with new eyes, wondering what secrets they might be keeping in their ancient shadows. The baby kicked again, more insistently this time, as if sensing her unease. Maya placed both hands on her belly and made a silent promise. Whatever was hidden in these woods, whatever danger Tom had hinted at, she would uncover the truth. Her child deserved to know their family's real history, no matter how dark it might be. The scratching in the walls that night was louder than ever. The morning light filtered through the ancient canopy above as Maya made her way deeper into the grove behind the cabin. Her grandmother's journal clutched in one hand, she followed what appeared to be an overgrown path winding between the massive redwood trunks. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her mounting anxiety. 3 trees bore the distinctive markings her grandmother had sketched, crude symbols carved into bark that had healed over decades into raised, weathered scars. Maya traced them with her fingertips, feeling the rough texture tell stories she couldn't yet understand. The symbols weren't random. They formed a pattern pointing deeper into the forest. Behind her, a branch snapped. Maya spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. The grove stood empty, morning mist curling between the trees like ghostly fingers. She waited, listening to the forest breathe around her, the whisper of wind through needles, the distant call of a jay, the creak of ancient wood. Nothing. She turned back to the marked tree and nearly screamed. A man stood 10 feet away, so still he might have grown from the earth itself. Tall and lean, with silver-streaked hair and clothes that suggested he belonged more to the forest than civilization. His eyes, pale blue and sharp, studied her with unsettling intensity. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her belly. "This is my property. Property." He spoke the word like it tasted bitter. "Your grandmother knew better than that. No one owns these trees. You knew Eleanor?" Something shifted in his expression. Surprise maybe, or recognition. "You have her eyes." He stepped closer, and Maya noticed the way he moved, silent and deliberate. But not her wisdom, apparently. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're playing with forces you don't understand." He gestured toward the carved symbols. "Some secrets are buried for good reason." Maya lifted her grandmother's journal. "She left me this. She wanted me to know." The man's gaze fixed on the leather-bound book, and for the first time, his composure cracked. "Eleanor kept records." The question came out sharp, urgent. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been protecting what your family started long before you were born." He held out his hand. "Give me the journal." "No." Maya stepped backward, bumping against the scarred trunk. "Not until you tell me what's going on." His jaw tightened. "My name is Garrett Thorne. I was your grandmother's partner in certain endeavors. That journal contains information that could get you killed. People keep telling me that, but no one explains why." Thorne glanced around the grove, his body tense with watchfulness. "Because There are millions of dollars hidden in these trees. Your great-grandfather, along with others, used this land to launder money during Prohibition. Gold, cash, bonds, all of it buried or hidden where only family members could find it. Maya's legs felt suddenly weak. That's impossible. The symbols are a map. Your grandmother spent decades moving the treasure, keeping it safe from those who would kill for it. His pale eyes locked onto hers. They're still out there, and now they know you exist. The baby kicked hard, making Maya gasp. The stress was getting to both of them. Why should I trust you? Because I loved your grandmother, and I promised her I'd keep you safe if anything happened. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She studied his weathered face, seeing genuine pain there. She never mentioned you. We kept our relationship quiet. Had to, considering the circumstances. He moved closer, his expression urgent. Maya, listen to me. There's a syndicate that's been searching for this treasure for decades. They killed your great-grandfather when he refused to talk. They may have killed Eleanor, too. The lawyers said it was a heart attack. Lawyers say a lot of things. Thorne's voice turned grim. Eleanor called me 3 days before she died. Said she felt watched, that someone had been asking questions in town. Then suddenly she's dead, and a week later you inherit everything. That's not coincidence. Maya's mind reeled. You think they're watching me now? I know they are. He pointed through the trees toward the cabin. Black sedan parked on the main road since yesterday morning. Same car that was in town when Eleanor died. Terror crawled up Maya's spine. She thought about the isolation, how far she was from help, how vulnerable she and her unborn child were in this remote place. What do you want me to do? Come with me. There's a safe place deeper in the mountains where you can stay until we figure this out. Run away? I just got here. Your grandmother ran for 40 years. It's what kept her alive. Thorne's expression softened slightly. I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but that baby you're carrying is Eleanor's legacy too. She'd want both of you safe. Maya looked down at the journal in her hands, then back at this stranger who claimed to hold the key to her family's dark past. In the distance, she could swear she heard the sound of car doors slamming. Maya's hands trembled as she held the photograph up to the dying afternoon light filtering through the cabin's grimy windows. The image showed a much younger version of her grandmother standing next to a massive redwood, but it was the man beside her that made Maya's breath catch. He wore what looked like a park ranger's uniform, and his arm was wrapped possessively around her grandmother's waist. On the back, someone had written Sarah and Robert, 1987, our secret safe in the Giants. The baby kicked sharply, as if sensing her agitation. Maya pressed her free hand to her belly, trying to calm both herself and the child within. Nothing about this inheritance made sense. Her grandmother had been a seamstress in Sacramento, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment. How had she owned property in one of California's most protected forests? A metallic grinding sound from outside shattered the silence. Maya froze, photograph still clutched in her fingers. Through the window, she glimpsed the front end of a dark SUV, pushing through the overgrown brush that served as her driveway. Her pulse spiked. She hadn't been expecting anyone, and the nearest neighbor was supposedly miles away. Moving as quietly as her pregnant body would allow, Maya crept toward the back of the cabin. The photograph and journal went into her jacket pocket as she searched for another way out. The back door was warped and stuck, requiring several precious seconds of wrestling before it finally gave way with a loud crack. "Maya Chen?" a man's voice called from the front of the cabin. "We need to talk." She didn't wait to hear more. The redwood forest closed around her as she stumbled into its cathedral-like depths, her sneakers slipping on the carpet of fallen needles. The trees rose like ancient pillars, their trunks so massive that several people holding hands couldn't encircle them. Under normal circumstances, their majesty might have taken her breath away. Now they simply provided cover. Behind her, she heard the cabin door slam open, multiple sets of footsteps, at least 2 people, maybe more. Maya pressed herself against the furrow-barked trunk of an enormous tree, trying to control her breathing. The baby seemed to sense danger, and had gone still. "She's here somewhere," a woman's voice said. "The car's still warm. Check the perimeter. She can't have gone far in her condition." Maya bit back a surge of anger. These people had been watching her, knew she was pregnant, knew she was vulnerable, but they'd underestimated her desperation. She'd spent months running from David's threats, had learned to move quietly and think quickly. Being 8 months pregnant only made the stakes higher. She waited until the footsteps moved away from her position, then began working deeper into the forest. The massive trees created a natural maze, their trunks blocking sight lines and muffling sound. But the uneven ground and her shifting center of gravity made every step treacherous. A branch snapped behind her. Close, too close. "Maya." The voice was different now, gentler, a man trying to sound reasonable. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to discuss your grandmother's property. There are things you don't understand." She kept moving, using her hands to guide herself from tree to tree. The forest floor was spongy with decades of fallen needles and leaves, which helped muffle her footsteps but made her footing uncertain. Her back ached with each step, and she could feel sweat beading despite the cool air. "Your grandmother was involved in something bigger than you know," the voice continued, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere in the acoustic maze of the trees. "Something that affects a lot of people, important people." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph again. Even in the forest's dim light, she could see the strange expression on her grandmother's face. Not quite happy, not quite afraid. And the ranger's possessive grip, our secret safe in the giants. What secret? What had her grandmother hidden here? A flash of movement to her left made her freeze. Through the trees she glimpsed a figure in dark clothing, moving parallel to her path. They were trying to herd her, she realized, cut off her escape routes. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Maya gasped before she could stop herself. The sound seemed to echo among the trees like a gunshot. "There," someone hissed. Maya abandoned stealth for speed, pushing through the underbrush as fast as she dared. Ferns whipped at her legs and low branches caught at her jacket. Behind her, pursuit crashed through the forest with far less concern for noise. She needed shelter, needed time to think, but more than that, she needed answers. The journal in her pocket felt like a lead weight, full of secrets she hadn't had time to decode. Whatever her grandmother had been protecting in these ancient trees, people were willing to chase a pregnant woman through dangerous terrain to get it. The question was whether Maya could survive long enough to find out what it was. Maya's hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel, the manila envelope Sam had given her burning like a brand on the passenger seat. The narrow forest road twisted ahead, each turn taking her deeper into the Redwood Cathedral where shadows held secrets she was only beginning to understand. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her anxiety. She pressed a palm to her belly, whispering reassurances she didn't feel. Whatever was hidden in these woods had already cost her grandmother's life, and now she was driving straight into the heart of it. Her phone buzzed against the dashboard. Marcus again. She'd ignored his last 3 calls, unable to face his questions when she had no answers herself. The smart thing would be to turn around, drive back to the city, and pretend she'd never heard of Blackwood Holdings or her grandmother's mysterious death. But the envelope seemed to pulse with urgency beside her, and Maya knew she was already too deep to turn back. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a fever dream, its weathered walls draped in morning mist. But now she saw what she'd missed before, how strategically it was positioned, offering clear sightlines down the mountain while remaining hidden from below. This wasn't just a retreat, it was a watchtower. Maya parked and grabbed the envelope, her footsteps loud on the wooden porch. Inside, dust motes danced in the filtered sunlight, and everything looked exactly as she'd left it. But something felt different. The air held a tension that made her skin crawl. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were photocopied documents, handwritten notes, and a letter in her grandmother's familiar script. Maya sank into the old armchair and began to read. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then they found me before I could finish what I started. I pray you'll be smarter than I was, that you'll take this evidence and run. But I know you, child. You have your mother's stubborn heart. Maya's throat tightened. Her mother had died when Maya was 12, a car accident that had always seemed too convenient, too final. Now she wondered if it had been anything but accidental. The trees are worth more than anyone imagines, but not for their timber. Blackwood Holdings has been using this forest for 30 years as a front. The real money flows through numbered accounts, shell companies, and politicians who ask no questions. Your grandfather stumbled onto it in 1987 when they first approached him about selling. He refused, so they found other ways. Maya's hands cramped as she gripped the letter. Outside, a branch scraped against the window with a sound like fingernails on glass. They've been harvesting more than redwoods, Maya. They've been washing money through fake conservation contracts, inflated timber assessments, and land deals that exist only on paper. Millions of dollars from sources I'm still trying to trace. The forest is their bank vault, and we're the only ones who know the combination. A photograph slipped from between the pages, a black and white image of men in suits standing beside a massive redwood. Maya recognized her grandfather's face, younger but wearing the same stubborn expression she'd inherited. The other faces were unfamiliar, but their expensive clothes and predatory smiles spoke volumes. I gathered what evidence I could, but they're watching me now. Black cars on the mountain road. Phone calls that disconnect when I answer. They know I know, and they're running out of patience. The deed to this property isn't just about land, Maya. It's about access to records, to hiding places they thought were secure forever. Maya's pulse hammered in her ears. Every sound, the settling timber, the whisper of wind through pine needles, seemed magnified and threatening. She forced herself to keep reading. There's more evidence hidden where only family would think to look. Your mother helped me hide it before she died. She made me promise to keep you safe, to keep you away from this darkness. But if something happens to me, if they silence me before the truth comes out, then you're the only one left who can stop them. The letter ended with coordinates and a cryptic reference to where the giants touched the sky. Maya studied the numbers, her mind racing. She'd need to go deeper into the forest, to places where the ancient trees grew tallest and shadows fell deepest. A car door slammed in the distance. Maya's blood turned to ice. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. Moving to the window, she peered through the dusty glass and saw a black SUV parked beside her rental car. Two men in dark suits were walking toward the cabin, their movements deliberate and predatory. She stuffed the letter and documents back into the envelope, her mind spinning through options. The back door led to the forest, but they'd expect that. The root cellar might hide her, but it would also trap her. The front porch creaked under heavy footsteps. Maya pressed herself against the wall, one hand protectively covering her belly, the other clutching the envelope that might be worth both their lives. Whatever her grandmother had discovered, whatever truth lay hidden in these ancient woods, powerful people were willing to kill to keep it buried. The doorknob turned with a soft, deadly click. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph. The woman in the faded image looked exactly like her. Same dark hair, same angular jawline, same stubborn set to the mouth. But the clothes were wrong, the hairstyle decades out of date. Written on the back in spidery handwriting, Eleanor Thorne, 1987. The journal lay open beside the photo, its yellowed pages filled with her grandmother's careful script. Maya had found both hidden beneath a loose floorboard in what must have been Eleanor's bedroom, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected them from decades of moisture and decay. Day 1847. The trees are singing again tonight. Samuel says it's just the wind, but I know better. They're trying to warn me about the men who came asking questions yesterday. 3 of them in expensive suits, claiming to represent some timber company I'd never heard of. They offered 10 times what this land is worth, but their eyes were cold as winter fog. Maya's baby kicked sharply, as if responding to her accelerating heartbeat. She shifted position on the dusty floor, trying to find comfort as she read on. Day 1851. Found the old survey maps in great-grandfather's trunk. The boundaries they show don't match what the county records claim. Someone has been stealing our land piece by piece, filing false documents, bribing officials. The grove extends much further than anyone realizes, nearly 1,000 acres of old growth that was supposed to be protected by treaty. A treaty. Maya's mind raced. She thought about Thomas Blackwood's words at the diner, his casual mention of developers and his family's long history in the area. How long had the Blackwoods been circling this land like vultures? Day 1863. Samuel is getting scared. Can't blame him. Found tire tracks leading right up to the big grove yesterday, and someone's been drilling core samples from the ancient trees. Whatever they're looking for, it's not just timber. Met with a geologist from UC Berkeley who confirmed my suspicions. There's something valuable hidden in these roots. Something that formed over thousands of years. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message, making her jump. The signal was weak but functional in this corner of the cabin. The message was from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll end up like your grandmother. Ice flooded her veins. She scrambled to her feet, journal clutched against her chest, and moved to the grimy window. The forest looked different now. Not peaceful, but watchful. Every shadow could hide a threat. How did they even know she was here? How long had they been watching? Another text arrived. Check the local newspaper archives. Ask about the hiking accident. This one felt different, less threatening, more urgent. A different sender, maybe someone trying to help rather than intimidate. Maya's hands shook as she typed back, "Who is this?" No response came. She turned back to the journal, flipping pages more frantically now. Day 1895. Samuel's gone. They made it look like an accident. Said he fell from the cliff trail while hiking alone. But Samuel never hiked alone, and he knew those trails better than anyone. Found his truck parked at the wrong trailhead, keys missing. The police won't listen. They think I'm just a grieving old woman seeing conspiracies where none exist. Day 1903. Lawyer says I need to update my will. Don't trust anyone in town now. Too many people asking questions about Samuel, about the land, about what we might have found out here. Going to leave everything to my granddaughter in Portland. She's young, smart, might be able to figure out what Samuel and I couldn't. Hidden the important documents where she'll find them if something happens to me. Maya felt tears burning her eyes. Eleanor had known she was in danger, had known they would come for her eventually, and she'd left this inheritance not as a gift but as a burden, a mystery that needed solving, a truth that demanded telling. The final entry was dated just 3 weeks ago. Day 1924. They came again today, more insistent this time. Offered me a fortune to sign over mineral rights to the grove. When I refused, the tall one with the scar smiled like a shark and said accidents happen to stubborn old women too. I'm scared, but I can't let them have what's hidden here. Too much depends on keeping it protected. Maya will understand when she sees what we've been guarding. The trees chose our family for this. We can't betray that trust. A sound outside made Maya freeze, the distant rumble of an engine growing closer. She stuffed the journal and photograph into her jacket, her movements awkward with pregnancy and panic. The engine noise was definitely approaching the cabin now, tires crunching over fallen branches and debris. Maya crept to the window and peered through a crack in the boards she'd used to secure it. A black SUV was winding up the overgrown drive, moving slowly but purposefully. 2 figures visible in the front seat, their faces obscured by the gathering dusk. They'd found her. The pre-dawn darkness felt different as Maya crept through the redwoods toward the coordinates she'd found in her grandfather's journal. Every shadow seemed to pulse with menace. Every creak of ancient wood made her heart skip. The baby moved restlessly inside her, as if sensing her fear. She'd waited until 3 in the morning to leave the cabin, using a back trail her grandfather had sketched in the margins of his notes. The flashlight beam carved a narrow tunnel through the blackness ahead of her. illuminating gnarled roots and patches of fern that glistened with dew. The coordinates led to a grove she'd never seen before, where 5 massive redwoods formed a perfect circle around a clearing barely 20 feet across. Maya checked her grandfather's compass again, then looked up at the trees towering above her like cathedral pillars. According to his journal, this was where it had all started in 1962. She pressed her palm against the nearest trunk, feeling the deep ridges of bark that had grown for over 1,000 years. Her grandfather's notes mentioned carved symbols, markers that would be invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Maya began walking the perimeter, running her fingers along the bark, searching for anything that didn't belong. On the 3rd tree, about 6 feet up, her fingertips found them. Shallow cuts in the bark, almost completely healed over but still detectable by touch. She aimed her flashlight at the spot and could just make out 3 intersecting lines forming a triangle with a vertical slash through the center. The same symbol she'd seen on the surveyor's map in the cabin. Maya's pulse quickened as she moved to the next tree, then the next. Each one bore the same mark, positioned at exactly the same height. Her grandfather hadn't just stumbled onto something valuable in these woods. He'd been part of marking it, claiming it, hiding it. A branch snapped somewhere behind her. Maya spun around, her flashlight beam sweeping wildly through the darkness. The forest had gone completely silent. No wind, no owl calls, no scurrying of small animals. Even the ever-present whisper of wind through the redwood canopy had ceased. "Hello?" she called softly, immediately regretting it. Her voice seemed to be swallowed by the massive trees. Another sound, closer this time. The soft scrape of a boot against bark. Maya's mouth went dry. Someone else was in the grove with her, moving carefully, trying to stay hidden. She clicked off her flashlight and pressed herself against the nearest tree, its enormous trunk easily concealing her body. In the absolute darkness, her other senses sharpened. She could hear breathing that wasn't her own, coming from somewhere across the clearing. Slow, controlled breaths of someone trying to remain undetected. The baby gave a sharp kick, and Maya bit back a gasp. She couldn't run. Not in her condition, not in this darkness through unfamiliar terrain. Whoever was out there would hear her crashing through the underbrush long before she reached safety. A new sound made her blood freeze. The metallic click of a gun being cocked. "I know you're here, Maya." The voice was male, calm, almost conversational. "There's nowhere to go. These trees have been keeping secrets for 60 years. They can keep one more." Maya recognized the voice now. Frank Morrison, the man who'd approached her at the diner. The same Frank Morrison whose business card she'd found in the surveyor's files dated 3 years ago. "Your grandfather was a stubborn man," Frank continued, his footsteps moving slowly around the perimeter of the grove. "Cost us a lot of time and money over the years, but he's gone now, and you don't have to make the same mistakes." Maya pressed harder against the tree, feeling the rough bark through her jacket. Her grandfather's journal was in her back pocket, but she didn't dare reach for it. The slightest movement might give away her position. "See, Maya, what's buried under this grove is worth more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Your family's been sitting on a gold mine, literally. But there are people who've invested heavily in keeping it quiet, people who don't like complications." A beam of light suddenly cut through the darkness, much stronger than Maya's small flashlight. Frank had brought professional equipment. The light swept methodically through the grove, probing behind each massive trunk. "The smart thing would be to walk away," Frank said, his voice growing closer. "Take the money we're offering for the cabin and disappear. Raise your baby somewhere safe, somewhere far from here." The light was 2 trees away now, then 1. In seconds, it would reach her hiding spot. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, protecting the life growing inside her. Whatever her grandfather had been involved in, whatever secrets these trees were hiding, it had already cost him his life. She wouldn't let it cost her baby's future. As Frank's flashlight beam crept toward her tree, Maya made her choice. She stepped out into the clearing, hands raised, squinting into the blinding light. "I'm listening," she said. The generator hummed to life on the third pull, its mechanical growl cutting through the forest's silence. Maya had spent the morning preparing, loading the chainsaw with fresh fuel, sharpening the blade and marking the trees she'd identified from her grandfather's journal. The ancient redwood that towered behind the cabin bore the subtle scratches she'd finally noticed, barely visible scarring that formed a crude arrow pointing northwest. She followed the direction it indicated, counting her steps as the journal had instructed. Every 50 paces, she found another marked tree, their scars weathered but unmistakable once she knew what to look for. The trail led deeper into the grove, where the canopy grew so thick that afternoon felt like twilight. At the 7th marked tree, Maya stopped. According to her grandfather's notes, this was it. The tree stood apart from the others, its base swollen with the characteristic burl growth that made redwood so valuable. But as she circled the massive trunk, she noticed something odd about the burl's shape, too uniform, too geometric. The chainsaw's weight felt enormous in her trembling hands. Everything about this felt wrong, destructive, almost sacrilegious. These trees had stood for over 1,000 years, and she was about to wound one based on cryptic notes from a man she'd barely known. But the baby kicked hard against her ribs, reminding her of the bills stacking up, the dwindling bank account, the future she couldn't provide without some kind of miracle. Maya positioned the blade against the burl and squeezed the trigger. The saw bit into the wood with surprising ease, too easy for healthy redwood. Sawdust sprayed in reddish clouds as she cut a careful rectangle into the swollen growth. When the section of bark fell away, Maya's breath caught in her throat. The hollow behind it was perfectly carved, lined with what looked like cedar to prevent rot. And inside, wrapped in oiled canvas, sat a metal case about the size of a briefcase. Maya's hands shook as she pulled it free. The case was heavier than she'd expected, and when she set it on the ground to open it, the latches clicked with the precision of quality craftsmanship. Inside, nestled in custom foam padding, lay stacks of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be small vials of some kind of liquid. The photographs made her stomach turn. Black and white images of the forest, but not as she knew it now. These showed clear-cut sections, massive stumps, and machinery she didn't recognize. Men in suits stood beside the equipment, their faces sharp and businesslike. She recognized one face immediately, the man from the newspaper clipping she'd found, the one whose eyes had seemed familiar. The documents were worse. Contracts dated from the 1980s, bearing letterhead from Meridian Industries and signatures she couldn't make out. But the content was clear enough. Agreements to harvest specific sections of old-growth redwood, permits that should never have been issued, and payment schedules that made Maya's head spin. Millions of dollars had changed hands. But it was the correspondence that made everything click into place. Letters between her grandfather and someone identified only as RM from Meridian Industries. The tone grew increasingly heated as the dates progressed, her grandfather's handwriting becoming more erratic with each exchange. "The deal is off," read one letter in her grandfather's familiar scrawl. "What you're doing isn't selective harvesting, it's systematic destruction. I won't be part of it anymore." The response, typed on corporate letterhead, was cold and threatening. "Your cooperation wasn't optional, Ben. You know too much to walk away now. Consider your family's safety carefully." Maya's blood went cold. Her grandfather hadn't been involved in conservation efforts. He'd been complicit in illegal logging operations that had devastated sections of protected forest. And when he'd tried to back out, they'd threatened his family. The final document in the stack was a handwritten note, clearly intended for whoever found the cache. "If you're reading this, they probably got to me." The vials contained soil samples from the contaminated areas where they dumped chemical waste. The coordinates are marked on the back of each photo. "This is the only evidence that exists. Use it wisely. Trust no one from Meridian Industries. They have people everywhere, including in the Forest Service." Maya sank back against the tree trunk, the implications washing over her in waves. Her grandfather hadn't just stumbled onto valuable information, he'd been murdered for it. and now she had the evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful corporations on the West Coast. A branch snapped somewhere in the forest behind her. Maya spun around, clutching the metal case against her chest. The woods seemed to press closer, every shadow potentially hiding a threat. She thought of Caitlin's warnings, of the white truck, of the man who'd been asking questions in town. They already knew she was here. They were probably watching her right now, waiting to see what she'd found. Maya shoved the documents back into the case and snapped it shut. Whatever her grandfather had started, she was in it now, whether she wanted to be or not. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the photographs spread across the kitchen table. The faces looking back at her told a story she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. Her grandfather, impossibly young, stood beside men in expensive suits next to what appeared to be freshly cut redwood stumps. In the background, she could make out the skeletal framework of construction equipment. The date on the back read 1987, the same year the environmental movement had gained serious momentum in Northern California. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered to herself, running her finger over her grandfather's image. The man she remembered had been a fierce protector of the forest, someone who spoke about the trees like they were sacred beings. Yet here he was, apparently participating in their destruction. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Through the window she saw a sheriff's deputy standing on the porch, his hand resting casually on his radio. Maya quickly gathered the photographs and shoved them into the manila envelope, her heart racing. "Miss Chen?" The deputy's voice carried through the door. "I'm Deputy Morrison. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the incident at the lumber mill yesterday." Maya opened the door, keeping her expression neutral despite the panic clawing at her chest. "I already gave a statement to the other officers." "I understand that, ma'am, but there are some inconsistencies we need to clear up." Morrison was younger than she'd expected, with earnest eyes that seemed genuinely concerned. "May I come in?" She stepped aside reluctantly, watching as his gaze swept the cabin's interior. The envelope containing the photographs felt like it was burning against her palm where she'd hidden it behind her back. "You mentioned you were hiking in the area when you heard the explosion," Morrison said, pulling out a small notebook. "But the trail you described doesn't actually connect to the mill property. There's a fence line and about half a mile of dense undergrowth between them." Maya's mouth went dry. She hadn't realized her lie would be so easily checked. I must have gotten confused about which trail I was on. Everything happened so fast." Morrison nodded slowly, but his eyes had sharpened. "The thing is, Miss Chen, we found fresh footprints leading from the mill directly toward this property. Size 7 women's boots, which matches what you're wearing now." The baby kicked hard against Maya's ribs, as if sensing her distress. She pressed a hand to her belly, trying to buy herself time to think. "I don't understand what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly, were you on mill property yesterday before the explosion?" Before Maya could answer, another voice cut through the tension. "She was with me." Both Maya and the deputy turned to see a woman stepping out of the shadows near the fireplace. Maya's breath caught. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the same shade of green as Maya's own. "And you are?" Morrison asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. "Eleanor Chen," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "Maya's grandmother." Maya felt the world tilt sideways. Her grandmother had died when she was 3 years old. She had vague memories of a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, but this person radiated an entirely different energy, sharp, calculating, dangerous. "Grandmother?" Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. Eleanor's smile was cold. "Surprised, dear? I don't blame you. Your parents thought it was easier to let everyone believe I was dead rather than explain where I'd been all these years." Morrison looked between them, clearly confused by the family drama unfolding before him. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification." Eleanor reached into her purse and produced a California driver's license. Morrison studied it carefully, then handed it back. "According to this, you live in Sacramento." I do. I came up here yesterday to visit my granddaughter and help her sort through my late husband's belongings. Eleanor moved to stand beside Maya, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something else, something that reminded Maya of the forest floor after rain. We were together all day yesterday, weren't we, Maya? The question carried an undertone that made Maya's skin crawl, but she found herself nodding. Yes, we were going through old papers. Morrison made a few notes, then closed his notebook. Well, that clears up the timeline issue. Though, I have to say, Miss Chen, you should be more careful about wandering around the woods in your condition. There have been some dangerous people in the area lately. After the deputy left, Maya turned to face the woman claiming to be her grandmother. Who are you really? Eleanor's facade dropped away like a discarded mask, revealing something much more predatory underneath. I'm exactly who I said I am. And we need to talk about what you found in those trees, Maya, because some secrets are worth killing for. The envelope in Maya's hand suddenly felt heavier than lead. The USB drive felt like a burning coal in Maya's pocket as she made her way through the pre-dawn darkness toward the ancient redwood where she'd hidden her grandfather's journal. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound made her freeze. The conversation she'd overheard between Detective Morrison and the stranger had shattered any illusion of safety she might have clung to. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake, safe house ready. Come now. But how could she trust anyone when the police themselves were compromised? She turned the phone off completely, knowing they could track her through it. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. I know, little one, she whispered, one hand on her belly. Mama's scared too. The hollow in the redwood's base looked undisturbed, but Maya's heart nearly stopped when her searching fingers found nothing but bark and dirt. The journal was gone. Looking for this? Maya spun around to find Detective Morrison stepping out from behind a neighboring tree, the leather journal in his hands. In the dim light filtering through the canopy, his face looked different, harder, more predatory. You've been very persistent, Maya. I have to admire that, even if it's incredibly inconvenient. He tucked the journal inside his jacket. Your grandfather was persistent too, right up until the end. You killed him. The words came out as barely a whisper. Cancer killed him. I just helped him understand that sharing certain family stories would be detrimental to everyone's health, including yours. Morrison took a step closer. He was supposed to take those secrets to the grave. Instead, he left you a treasure map. Maya's hand moved instinctively to the USB drive. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, we both know what you found in that cabin. What you've been digging up, literally and figuratively. The question is, how much do you actually understand about what your family was involved in? Despite her terror, Maya found herself genuinely curious. The pieces of the puzzle had been driving her mad, and here was someone who seemed to know the whole picture. Enlighten me, she said. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Your great-grandfather wasn't just a logger, Maya. He was a smuggler. These forests were perfect for moving contraband, up from Mexico and down from Canada. Drugs, weapons, people, whatever paid well. The logging operation was just cover. That's impossible. Your family built an empire. Those trees aren't just marking graves, sweetheart. They're marking drop points, safe houses, buried caches of money and merchandise. We're talking about a network that's been operating for nearly a century. Maya felt sick, but the documents I found, they showed the government was involved. Of course they were involved. You think an operation that size could run without official protection? Your great-grandfather had everyone in his pocket. Local law enforcement, federal agents, politicians. When he died, that network didn't just disappear. It evolved. The implications hit her like a physical blow. You're part of it. You're all part of it. I'm a practical man, Maya. This county runs on that money, has for generations. Your grandfather understood that. He took his cut and kept his mouth shut. But you, Morrison shook his head, you're stirring up ghosts that should stay buried. How much? The question came out before she could stop herself. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 50 million in cash and assets hidden throughout these woods. And that's just what we know about. Your family kept very detailed records, going back decades. Maya's mind raced. $50 million. Enough to disappear, to give her child a completely different life. Enough to never worry about money again. Here's what's going to happen, Morrison continued. You're going to give me that USB drive. Yes, I know you have it. And you're going to forget everything you've learned. In exchange, you get to walk away, you and the baby, clean slate. And if I refuse? Morrison's hand moved to his weapon. Let's not explore that option. Maya felt the baby kick again, stronger this time. She thought about her grandfather's words in the journal, about protecting family, about the price of secrets. She thought about Jake, about the life she could build with $50 million, about the life her child deserved. But she also thought about the bodies buried beneath those trees, about the families destroyed by whatever her ancestors had done, about the corruption that had rotted through her hometown like cancer. I need time to think, she said. Time's up. Morrison drew his gun. The USB drive, now. Maya reached slowly into her pocket, her fingers closing around the small device. Everything depended on what she did in the next few seconds. Her future. Her child's future, maybe the future everyone in this cursed town. The redwoods stood silent around them, ancient witnesses keeping their own counsel. The ancient redwood's hollow interior stretched upward into darkness, its walls scarred with decades of careful excavation. Maya pressed her palm against the rough bark, feeling the tree's slow pulse beneath her fingers. The beam of her flashlight revealed crude wooden shelves carved into the living wood, each one holding plastic-wrapped packages that caught the light like buried treasure. My God, she whispered, her voice echoing in the natural cathedral. How long has this been here? Thomas moved beside her, his own flashlight scanning the upper reaches of the hollow. Your grandfather started this in the 50s, but the operation really took off in the 70s. This tree alone holds maybe $2 million in product. Maya's legs felt weak. $2 million, hidden inside a tree that had been growing when Christ walked the earth. The baby kicked as if responding to her shock, and she placed a protective hand over her belly. Product, she repeated slowly. You mean drugs? High-grade cannabis, processed and ready for distribution. Your grandfather wasn't just some small-time grower, Maya. He was supplying half the West Coast. Thomas's voice carried a mixture of admiration and regret. The redwoods provided perfect cover. Who's going to suspect a nature preserve? The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The mysterious income that had supported her mother's education, the cabin's isolation, the warning in her grandfather's letter about powerful people who would kill to protect their secrets. The people who killed my mother, she said. They're still running this operation. The consortium. Thomas nodded grimly. A group of investors who took over after your grandfather died. Politicians, law enforcement, businessmen. They've been using this grove as their personal mint for decades. Maya backed away from the shelves, her mind reeling. And you work for them. I worked for your grandfather first. After he died, I didn't have much choice. His flashlight dimmed as he adjusted the beam, but when your mother tried to expose them, I couldn't stand by anymore. That's why I helped her gather evidence that got her killed. The accusation hung between them in the hollow space. Evidence that could still bring them down. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered manila envelope. She hid copies of everything. Financial records, shipping manifests, photographs. I've been keeping it safe, waiting for the right moment. Maya stared at the envelope, understanding its weight. Her mother had died for whatever was inside. Why didn't you go to the police yourself? Half the local force is on their payroll. The sheriff, the DEA task force leader, even some FBI agents. Your mother tried the official channels first. His voice grew heavy with memory. They killed her before she could take it higher up the chain. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Maya gasped. The stress was getting to her, making her blood pressure spike. She needed to sit down, to breathe, to process the magnitude of what she'd stumbled into. "There's more," Thomas continued, seeming not to notice her distress. "This tree is just one of dozens. The entire grove is honeycombed with storage sites. We're standing in the middle of the largest illegal cannabis operation in Northern California. We need to leave." Maya's voice came out strained. "Now, before they realize I'm here. They already know." Thomas's flashlight clicked off, plunging them into absolute darkness. "I'm sorry, Maya. I truly am." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she fumbled for her own flashlight switch. The beam revealed Thomas pulling a gun from his waistband, his face etched with what looked like genuine regret. "You said you worked for my grandfather," she managed. "I did, but he's been dead 20 years, and the consortium pays better." The gun remained pointed at the ground, but his message was clear. "They want the envelope your mother hid, and they want you to disappear. Permanently." Maya's mind raced through her options. The tree's hollow had only one entrance, and Thomas blocked it. But the space was narrow, and her flashlight gave her the advantage of sight. More importantly, he seemed reluctant to actually use the weapon. "My grandfather trusted you," she said, buying time while she calculated distances. "Your grandfather was a dreamer who thought he could control something bigger than himself. The consortium taught me better." But his voice wavered slightly. Maya shifted her weight, preparing to move. The envelope crinkled in Thomas's other hand, the evidence her mother had died protecting. If she could get past him, get back to her car, maybe she could still salvage something from this nightmare. "The baby," she said suddenly, inspiration striking. "You'd really kill a pregnant woman?" For just a moment, Thomas's resolve flickered. His gun hand dropped slightly, and Maya saw her chance. She lunged forward, swinging the heavy flashlight in a desperate arc toward his head, even as his surprised shout echoed through the hollow tree. The emergency room's fluorescent lights burned Maya's eyes as she sat hunched over in the plastic chair, clutching her belly. The fall down the hillside had left her scraped and bruised, but more terrifying was the cramping that had started. During her frantic escape from the logging site, Dr. Patel's gentle hands moved across her abdomen with the ultrasound wand, while Maya held her breath. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," Dr. Patel said, and Maya nearly sobbed with relief. "But you've had quite a shock to your system. I want to keep you overnight for observation." "I can't stay," Maya whispered. "They'll find me here." Dr. Patel frowned. "Mrs. Chen, are you in some kind of danger? Because if someone hurt you, it's complicated." Maya struggled to sit up. "Please, just tell me if the baby is okay." "For now, yes. But you need rest, and I strongly recommend." A commotion in the hallway cut her off. Maya's blood turned to ice as she heard a familiar voice speaking to the nurse outside. Detective Morrison. Her mind raced. Had he traced her car here? She grabbed Dr. Patel's arm. "Is there another way out?" Before the doctor could answer, Morrison appeared in the doorway. His face was grim, but when he saw Maya, something like relief flickered in his eyes. "Mrs. Chen, we need to talk. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer." "You're not under arrest." Morrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But Officer Hendricks is dead, shot twice in the chest about an hour ago. His body was found near some logging equipment up in the hills." Maya's world tilted. The young officer who had tried to help her, who had looked so uncertain about his partner's methods, gone. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tasting bile. "His patrol car was there too," Morrison continued, "along with evidence that suggests he was meeting someone who knew about the investigation." "It wasn't me," Maya said weakly. "I know." Morrison's admission surprised her. "Because 40 minutes ago, you were being admitted to this hospital. The timeline doesn't work. But Maya, whoever killed Hendricks, knows you were asking questions about the logging operation. They're cleaning house." Dr. Patel cleared her throat. "I'm going to have to ask you to continue this conversation elsewhere. My patient needs—" "Actually, doctor, she needs protection." Morrison's phone buzzed and he glanced at it, his expression darkening. Maya, I just got word that your cabin burned down 2 hours ago. Total loss. The fire department's calling it suspicious. The room seemed to spin around Maya. Everything her grandmother had left her, every connection to her past, gone. The journal pages she'd hidden under the floorboards, the photographs, even the carved symbols that might have held more clues. All of it reduced to ash. They're erasing everything, she whispered. Morrison nodded grimly. Which tells me you were getting close to something they couldn't afford to let you find. What did you discover up there? Maya looked between Morrison and Dr. Patel, calculating her options. The detective had just admitted the timeline cleared her of Hendrick's murder, and with her cabin destroyed, she had nowhere left to run. There's a mining operation, she said finally, hidden in the old-growth forest. They're extracting something valuable. I think it might be rare earth elements, worth millions. Morrison leaned forward. Who's running it? I don't know all the players, but Sheriff Walsh is involved. And there's a company called Redwood Holdings that's been buying up land. They killed my grandmother when she threatened to expose them. Can you prove any of this? Maya's heart sank. The evidence was in my cabin. But I saw the operation myself. Heavy machinery, processing equipment, armed guards. It's massive. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, he said, Maya, I need you to understand something. Sheriff Walsh has been my mentor for 15 years. If what you're saying is true, he ran a hand through his graying hair. It explains why certain cases have been buried, why evidence has gone missing, why Hendricks was so nervous about questioning you. He was trying to do the right thing, Maya said softly. Yeah, and it got him killed. Morrison's jaw tightened, which means anyone connected to this investigation is in danger, including you. Dr. Patel stepped forward. Detective, I really must insist. She's not safe here, Morrison interrupted. Hospital records are public. If they want to find her, this is the first place they'll look. He turned back to Maya. I know a place, off the grid, but we need to move now. Maya struggled to process everything. Her baby was safe for now, but her home was gone. A good man was dead, and the people responsible commanded resources she couldn't begin to fight. Her only hope lay in trusting a cop whose partner might be trying to kill her. Detective, she said quietly, how do I know you're not part of this too? Morrison met her eyes steadily. Because if I were, you'd already be dead. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph tucked inside the leather journal. Her grandmother's face smiled back at her from beside a younger version of the man she now knew as Vincent Thorne. But here he looked decades younger, his arm wrapped possessively around Grandma Rose's waist. The timestamp on the photo read 1967. That's impossible, she whispered to the empty cabin. Her grandfather had died when her mother was just a baby. Everyone said Rose had been a devoted widow for over 50 years. But the evidence sprawled across the kitchen table told a different story. Bank records, property deeds, and correspondence painted a picture of a decades-long affair between Rose McKinnon and the man who now wanted Maya dead. More disturbing were the geological surveys and timber assessments dating back to the 1960s, documents that revealed the true scope of what lay hidden in these woods. The Redwood Grove wasn't just valuable for its lumber. Deep beneath the ancient root systems lay rare earth mineral deposits worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The trees had been protecting more than Maya had ever imagined. A soft creak from the front porch made her freeze. She'd learned to distinguish between the cabin's natural settling sounds and something more sinister. This was definitely the latter. Moving silently, Maya gathered the most crucial documents and stuffed them into her jacket. The back window she'd left unlocked earlier would be her escape route, but first she needed to see who had found her. Peering through a gap in the curtains, her blood chilled. Vincent Thorne himself stood on her porch, no longer bothering with subterfuge. Gone was any pretense of the kindly businessman. His face wore the cold expression of someone accustomed to eliminating problems. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked the porch steps, and Maya caught glimpses of at least 3 others positioned around the cabin's perimeter. They'd come in force this time. "Maya," Thorne called out, his voice carrying the false warmth she now recognized as manipulation. "I know you're in there. We need to talk about your grandmother's legacy." She pressed herself against the wall beside the window, mind racing. The hiking trail she'd scouted earlier would take her deep into the grove, but reaching it meant crossing 30 yards of open ground. In her condition, with her growing belly making stealth difficult, the odds weren't good. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," Thorne continued, apparently content to monologue while his men moved into position. She understood the value of what she'd inherited, understood that some secrets are worth more than family sentiment. Maya's jaw clenched. The journal had revealed that Rose had discovered the mineral deposits decades ago and had been slowly, secretly selling mining rights to Thorne's companies. The cabin, the grove, even the trust fund that had sustained Maya's family, all of it built on Rose's Faustian bargain with this monster. "She protected you, you know," Thorne called out. "Made me promise that if anything happened to her, her family would be left alone. But that was before you started digging into things better left buried." A shadow passed by the kitchen window. They were moving closer. Maya made her decision. Grabbing the poker from beside the fireplace, she crept toward the back of the cabin. The window slid open with barely a whisper, and she eased herself through, grateful for all those yoga classes that had kept her flexible despite her pregnancy. The forest floor was soft with decades of fallen needles, muffling her footsteps as she moved from tree to tree. Behind her, she heard Thorne's patience finally snap. Enough games. Find her. The sound of splintering wood told her they'd broken down the front door. She had minutes before they realized she was gone and expanded their search. Moving deeper into the grove, Maya felt the ancient redwoods closing around her like protective guardians. Some of these trees had been alive for over 1,000 years, had weathered countless storms and threats. They'd survived this long by adapting, by being stronger than whatever tried to destroy them. She could do the same. The hidden cache she'd prepared yesterday was 50 yards ahead, a waterproof container with supplies and copies of the most damning documents. But as she approached the massive trunk where she'd concealed it, Maya heard something that made her heart stop. Footsteps, multiple sets, coming from different directions. They'd anticipated her escape route. "Maya." The voice was closer now, maybe 20 yards behind her. "There's nowhere to run. These woods aren't as vast as you think, and we know them better than you do." She pressed herself against the enormous trunk of an ancient redwood, its bark rough against her back. The baby shifted inside her, as if sensing her fear. She placed a protective hand over her belly, drawing strength from the life growing within. Thorne was wrong about one thing. These trees had been hiding secrets for decades, protecting what mattered most. Maya just had to trust them one more time. As the footsteps drew closer, she began to climb. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness as Maya descended deeper into the underground chamber, her heart hammering against her ribs. The wooden steps creaked ominously under her weight, each sound echoing off unseen walls. Behind her, Jack's breathing was shallow and rapid, his injured arm pressed against his chest. "There," she whispered, pointing the light toward what appeared to be another tunnel entrance. "We can follow that passage and hopefully circle back to the surface somewhere else." But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, Maya's flashlight illuminated something that made her stomach lurch. Dozens of wooden crates lined the walls, some rotting with age, others newer. On the nearest crate, burned into the wood, was a symbol she recognized from her grandfather's journal, the same twisted tree marking that had appeared on several pages. "Maya, we need to keep moving," Jack urged, glancing nervously at the ceiling where the sound of footsteps grew louder. She couldn't resist prying open the nearest crate. Inside, nestled in moldy straw, were bundles of cash and what looked like ledgers. She grabbed one of the books, its leather cover worn smooth. Even in the dim light, she could make out columns of numbers, dates, and names. Her grandfather's handwriting filled the pages. "It's a record," she breathed. "Every transaction, every payment. Jack, this goes back decades." The footsteps above suddenly stopped. Maya killed the flashlight, plunging them into absolute darkness. They stood frozen, listening. Then came the sound of voices, Donovan's gravelly tone, and another man she didn't recognize. "Split up," Donovan ordered. "Check every tunnel." They couldn't have gone far. Maya grabbed Jack's good hand and pulled him toward the passage she'd spotted earlier. They moved by touch, feeling along the rough-hewn walls. The baby shifted inside her, a sharp kick that made her gasp. She pressed her free hand to her belly, willing her child to be still. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly. Maya's legs ached, and Jack was leaning heavily against her now, his breathing becoming more labored. Just when she thought they might be trapped in an underground maze forever, she felt cool air on her face. "There's an opening ahead," she whispered. The tunnel ended at what appeared to be a natural cave formation. Maya risked turning on the flashlight again, keeping it pointed low. They were in a cavern carved from the limestone beneath the redwood grove, and there, set into the far wall, was a metal door that looked decades old. As they approached it, Maya noticed fresh footprints in the dirt. Someone had been here recently. The door was unlocked, opening with a rusty groan that made them both wince. Beyond the door lay a small room that had clearly been used as an office. Filing cabinets lined one wall, and a desk sat in the center, covered with papers and maps. But it was the wall of photographs that made Maya's blood run cold. Pictures spanning decades showed her grandfather with various men in expensive suits, all shaking hands or standing beside logging equipment. In several photos, she recognized a younger version of the man who'd introduced himself as Thompson. But the most shocking image was a recent one, her grandfather with Donovan, both smiling at the camera. "This can't be right," Maya muttered, pulling the photo from the wall. According to the date stamp, it had been taken just 2 months before her grandfather's death. Jack examined the maps spread across the desk. "Maya, look at this. These aren't just logging maps. They're showing mineral deposits, underground water sources, even archaeological sites." He pointed to several red X marks scattered across the surveyed area. "Your grandfather wasn't just in the lumber business. This whole operation was about land speculation." A newspaper clipping tucked beneath one of the maps caught Maya's eye. The headline read, "Environmental activist dies in suspicious accident." The article detailed the death of Sarah Chen, a woman who had been investigating illegal logging practices in the area. The date was 3 years ago. "Jack," Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "What if my grandfather wasn't the victim here? What if he was part of it all along?" Before Jack could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the cavern behind them. Maya quickly stuffed the photograph and newspaper clipping into her jacket pocket. There had to be another way out of this room. As if reading her thoughts, Jack pointed to a ventilation grate near the ceiling. "Think you can fit through there?" Maya looked at her protruding belly and shook her head. But then she noticed something else. A second door, partially hidden behind one of the filing cabinets. Together, they managed to push the cabinet aside just as the voices in the cavern grew dangerously close. The door opened onto a narrow stairway leading upward. Maya could smell fresh air and pine needles. Somewhere above them was the surface, and hopefully a way to finally escape with the truth about what her family had been hiding in these ancient trees. The emergency room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Maya sat on the examination table, her hands protectively cradling her belly. The baby had been moving restlessly since their escape from the cabin, as if sensing the chaos surrounding them. Dr. Chen's gentle probing and the steady rhythm of the fetal heart monitor provided the first moments of peace she'd felt in hours. "Everything looks good," Dr. Chen assured her, removing the ultrasound wand. "Baby's heart rate is strong, and there's no sign of distress, but I want you to take it easy for the next few days. No stress, plenty of rest." Maya almost laughed at the impossibility of that prescription, but she nodded. Jake squeezed her hand as they left the hospital, both of them scanning the parking lot for any sign of Marcus or his associates. The stolen documents felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds in Maya's backpack. "We need somewhere safe to go through these papers," Jake said, helping her into his truck. "Somewhere they won't think to look." Maya closed her eyes. thinking. The Mendocino Library, it's public, has security cameras, and Clara volunteers there on weekends. She'll help us. They drove north through winding coastal roads, constantly checking mirrors for pursuit. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly to their left, its grey-green surface choppy under the overcast sky. Maya found herself thinking about her grandmother, about the secrets that had died with her, about the weight of truth finally coming to light. Clara was shelving books in the library's local history section when they arrived. Her eyes widened at their disheveled appearance, but she quickly ushered them to a private study room in the back. "What happened to you two?" she whispered, locking the door behind them. "Your cousin Marcus tried to kill us," Maya said bluntly, spreading the stolen documents across the table. "But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with." The papers painted a picture more complex and damaging than Maya had imagined. The logging operation was just the surface. Beneath it lay a web of environmental cover-ups, illegal chemical dumping, and systematic destruction of protected habitats that went back decades. The Northwood Preservation Society wasn't preserving anything. They were providing cover for one of the most extensive environmental crimes in California history. "Jesus," Clara breathed, reading over Maya's shoulder. "This contract here. They've been dumping industrial waste in the old growth groves for 20 years. The trees are dying from the inside out." Jake found the financial records. "Look at these payments. Senators, EPA officials, state environmental regulators. They've bought protection at every level." Maya's hands trembled as she uncovered a folder marked Heritage Grove Acquisition. Inside were detailed plans to clear-cut the entire area where her cabin stood, including the grove where she'd found the gold. But it wasn't the trees they were after. It was what lay beneath them. "They know about the gold," she said, her voice hollow. "But look at this geological survey. It's not just gold down there. There are rare earth mineral deposits worth hundreds of millions. The environmental damage from extracting them would be catastrophic," Clara finished. "The watershed feeds 3 counties. If they contaminate the groundwater..." A map fell from between the pages, and Maya's blood ran cold. The proposed mining operation covered thousands of acres, including the burial ground where her ancestors rested. Red X marks dotted the landscape like wounds, each one representing a drilling site. "My grandmother knew," Maya whispered. "That's why she left me the cabin. She was trying to protect the land, but she couldn't fight them alone. She needed someone who had nothing to lose." Jake's phone buzzed with a news alert. "Maya, look at this." The headline made her stomach drop. Environmental activist Maya Harrison wanted in connection with terrorist threats against logging industry. The article painted her as a radical eco-terrorist who had made death threats against Northwood executives. Her photo, an old one from college, stared back at her with the word dangerous beneath it. "They're moving fast," Clara said grimly. "If law enforcement believes this, they'll shoot first and ask questions later." Maya stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the quiet coastal town went about its afternoon routine, unaware that the very ground beneath their feet was under threat. She thought about her baby, about the world she was bringing a child into, about the choice between running and fighting. "We can't run from this," she said finally. "Even if we got away, they'd extract everything and cover it up. By the time anyone realized what happened, it would be too late." "So what do we do?" Jake asked. Maya turned back to the documents, her grandmother's words echoing in her memory. "Sometimes the trees remember what people choose to forget. We make sure the whole world remembers," she said. "We expose everything." Clara was already reaching for her phone. "I know someone who can help, an investigative journalist who's been following environmental corruption cases. She's won Pulitzers for this kind of work. Can we trust her?" "With our lives," Clara said, "because that's exactly what we're doing." The ancient redwood groaned as Maya pressed her back against its massive trunk, her heart hammering so hard she was certain it would give her away. Through the maze of towering trees, she could hear them, at least 3 sets of footsteps crashing through the underbrush, getting closer with each passing second. Her phone had died an hour ago, and the hiking trail that led back to civilization felt impossibly far. The baby kicked frantically inside her, as if sensing the danger that surrounded them both. Maya placed a protective hand over her swollen belly and forced herself to breathe slowly, quietly. "She can't have gone far," a gruff voice echoed through the forest. Maya recognized it immediately. Detective Morrison, the man who had pretended to help her investigate her grandmother's death while secretly working for the Meridian Corporation all along. The GPS tracker on her car stopped transmitting 2 miles back. Maya's blood turned to ice. They'd been tracking her movements probably for weeks. Every visit to the cabin, every trip to gather evidence, every moment she'd thought she was being careful. They'd known exactly where she was. Another voice responded, younger and more nervous. "What if she already made copies of the documents? What if she sent them to someone? Then we contain the damage," Morrison replied coldly. "But first, we find her." Maya clutched the waterproof bag containing the evidence she'd discovered hidden in her grandmother's cabin. Decades of correspondence between Meridian Corporation executives and government officials, detailing their illegal harvesting operations in protected redwood groves. Her grandmother hadn't been a simple forest caretaker, as Maya had always believed. She'd been documenting Meridian's crimes for 30 years, gathering proof of their systematic destruction of irreplaceable ancient forests to harvest the rare fungi that grew only in the root systems of thousand-year-old trees. The fungi were worth millions, a key component in revolutionary cancer treatments that Meridian had been secretly developing while publicly funding environmental protection groups to throw investigators off their trail. Maya's grandmother had died because she'd finally gathered enough evidence to expose them. A branch snapped nearby, and Maya pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the massive redwood. Her hiding spot was precarious. If they circled around to the other side of the tree, they'd spot her immediately, but moving would be even more dangerous. "Check the hollow trees," Morrison commanded. "She knows these woods better than we do." Maya's mind raced. She did know these forests, had spent countless childhood summers exploring them with her grandmother, but that knowledge wouldn't help if she couldn't reach her car. She needed a distraction, something to draw them away from this area long enough for her to make a run for it. The baby shifted again, pressing against her ribs, and Maya winced. At 8 months pregnant, she wasn't exactly built for stealth or speed, but she had something they didn't: desperation born of protecting not just herself, but her unborn child. Carefully, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the small emergency whistle her grandmother had always insisted she carry. If she could throw it far enough in the opposite direction and trigger it somehow. A hand suddenly grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. Maya found herself face to face with a man in expensive outdoor gear, his eyes cold and calculating. Not Morrison, someone new, someone who'd approached from the blind side while she'd been focused on the voices. "Found her!" he called out, his grip tightening painfully on her arm. Maya didn't hesitate. She drove her knee upward as hard as she could, connecting with his groin. He doubled over with a grunt of pain, and she broke free, crashing through the undergrowth toward what she hoped was the trail. Behind her, shouts erupted as Morrison and the others converged on their location. Branches tore at her clothes and scratched her face as she stumbled through the forest, her pregnancy making every step awkward and uncertain. The sound of rushing water reached her ears, the creek that ran alongside the main trail. If she could reach it, she could follow it downstream to where she'd hidden her car. But the voices behind her were getting closer, and her lungs burned with the effort of running. She burst through a line of ferns and nearly tumbled down the creek bank. The water was deeper than she remembered, swollen from recent rains, but on the other side, through the trees, she could see a flash of color that might be her Honda Civic. Maya looked back once. Morrison emerged from the trees 50 yards behind her, raising something in his hands. Not a gun, a tranquilizer dart. They wanted her alive, at least temporarily. She plunged into the icy creek water, gasping as the current tried to sweep her downstream. The waterproof bag with the evidence felt like an anchor, but she held it above her head as she struggled across. Her feet finally found purchase on the opposite bank, just as the first dart whistled past her ear. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Maya pressed herself against the massive redwood trunk, her heart hammering against her ribs. Detective Chen's voice crackled through the radio clipped to her jacket. "Maya, stay exactly where you are. We've got Blackwood Industries surrounded." She peered around the ancient bark, watching armed federal agents emerge from the forest like ghosts materializing from shadow. 6 months of running, hiding, and fighting had led to this moment. The USB drive containing decades of illegal logging records and murder cover-ups was finally in the right hands. Marcus Blackwood stood 30 yards away in a small clearing, his expensive suit incongruous among the towering trees. Even now, cornered and outgunned, he maintained that predatory confidence that had terrorized her family for generations. "Maya Reeves," he called out, his voice carrying easily through the forest silence. "You've caused quite a stir for someone who just wanted to fix up an old cabin." She stepped out from behind the tree, one hand instinctively protective over her rounded belly. At 7 months pregnant, she moved more carefully now, but her resolve had only strengthened. "My grandmother tried to expose you 40 years ago," Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "She knew you were stealing protected land, forging permits, bribing officials. She knew you killed anyone who got in your way." Blackwood's laugh was cold. "Eleanor was a romantic fool. She thought these trees were sacred. I see them for what they really are. Resources waiting to be harvested. Worth killing for? Worth everything." His eyes glittered with fanatical certainty. "Do you have any idea how much money is standing around us right now? Each of these ancient giants is worth millions in international markets. The Chinese will pay astronomical prices for old-growth redwood." FBI agent Rodriguez stepped into the clearing, weapon drawn. "Marcus Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and violation of federal environmental protection laws." Blackwood raised his hand slowly, but his attention remained fixed on Maya. "You think this ends anything? My family built an empire from these forests. We own judges, senators, environmental officials. This is barely a setback." "The records say otherwise." Maya pulled out her phone, showing him the screen. 40 years of bribes, forged documents, assassinations. It's all uploaded to every major news outlet. Your empire is finished. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Blackwood's face. "You don't understand what you've unleashed. There are people above me, people who won't let this information go public. Then they can join you in federal prison." Agent Rodriguez moved closer with handcuffs. "The Attorney General is personally overseeing this case. Your political connections won't help you now." As they cuffed Blackwood, he turned back to Maya one final time. "Your grandmother died believing she could protect these trees. Your mother died running from the truth. What makes you think you'll fare any better?" Maya felt her baby kick sharply, as if responding to the tension. She placed both hands on her belly and looked up at the cathedral of ancient redwoods stretching toward the sky. "Because I'm not running anymore." 3 hours later, Maya sat on the cabin's front porch, watching the last of the FBI vehicles disappear down the winding mountain road. Detective Chen had stayed behind to wrap up final details. "The district attorney says Blackwood's organization is completely dismantled," Chen reported, settling into the chair beside her. 17 arrests total, including 3 state senators and a federal judge. The environmental crimes alone will put Blackwood away for life." Maya nodded, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. "What about the land, the cabin?" "It's yours, free and clear. Always was, legally. The forged transfer documents were part of Blackwood's scheme to claim mineral and logging rights." Chen smiled. "Congratulations, you own 50 acres of protected old-growth forest." The afternoon sun slanted through the massive trees, painting everything in shades of gold and green. Maya could almost feel her grandmother's presence in the whispered breeze through the canopy. "I'm going to restore this place," she said quietly. "Turn it into exactly what Grandma Eleanor dreamed, a sanctuary where people can come to understand how precious these ancient forests really are." "Sounds perfect." Chen stood to leave, then paused. "Your family fought for 3 generations to protect this land. You finally won." After Chen's car disappeared, Maya remained on the porch as evening settled over the forest. She felt her daughter moving inside her. "Yes, daughter," the ultrasound had confirmed, and whispered softly, "Your great-great-grandmother would be so proud. We're home now, little one. Finally home." The redwoods stood eternal and protective around the cabin, guardians of secrets finally revealed and promises finally kept.